The desert was endless. Hot winds carried dust across the broken land. The sky was gray with smoke and the ground was cracked like old glass. A beast roared in the distance, its steps heavy, its body massive, its eyes wild and burning red. Tied to this beast with rough iron chains was a girl, not human but alien. Her skin pale silver under the harsh sun, her hair tangled with dust, her hands bound so tightly that blood ran across her arms like red lines on stone. The captors laughed as they walked beside the beast, their armor black, their voices cruel. They pulled at the chains, making the alien girl stumble and fall again and again. Every time she tried to rise, the beast dragged her forward, her body scraping against sharp rocks, her lips bleeding, yet she stayed silent. She did not scream. She did not beg. Her eyes burned with quiet pain, but also with something else, something unbroken. For 10 days they planned to drag her. For 10 days across the wasteland, humiliation after humiliation until her spirit was crushed. The crowd that had gathered earlier had cheered when they tied her to the beast. They called her weak. They called her useless. They shouted that no one would help her, not even her own kind, and now, under the heavy sun, their words followed her like poison in the air. But the girl was not weak. Her chains rattled with every step, her body trembled. Her legs collapsed, yet deep inside, her mind whispered, "I will endure, I must endure," because she knew that survival was not only about her. There was something greater waiting, something hidden in her fate. The beast pulled hard, dragging her body through thorny bushes, leaving cuts across her back. The captors clapped their hands. One of them shouted, "She will not last even 5 days." Another spat on the ground, saying she should have begged for mercy. But now she will learn. Their voices were sharp, their laughter cruel, yet still she did not cry. Still she refused to give them the sound of her fear. As the sun set on the first day, the sky burned red and gold. The beast slowed and the captors made camp. They tied the alien girl to a sharp pole, leaving her chained in the dirt, her body broken, her lips dry. No water was given. No food was offered. She was left for the night as the wind grew colder. She looked at the stars above. Strange stars. Stars far from her home, and she whispered in her own language, words that no human could understand, but words filled with hope. "I will not break from the shadows." Unseen by the captors, another pair of eyes watched. A figure stood far away, hidden among rocks, silent and still. It was not one of them, it was not alien, it was human, his face marked by dust and travel, his eyes narrow and filled with anger. He had been watching since the beginning, watching the cruelty, watching the humiliation, but his lips stayed closed, his hands stayed still for now. The captors did not know they were being watched. They laughed around the fire, telling stories of how the alien girl's people had lost, how she was nothing but proof of their power. "For 10 days she will crawl like an animal," one of them shouted. "And when she breaks, the galaxy will know what happens to those who defy us." Their words echoed in the night, while the beast growled low and restless. The girl closed her eyes, her body shivering under the cold wind, her chains heavy on her chest. She felt pain in every bone, but her spirit still whispered, 10 days I must survive, 10 days. She did not know someone was watching, someone whose heart was already burning with conflict, someone who could not look away forever. The second day began with the cry of the beast, its roar shaking the still morning air. The captors woke quickly, laughing as they pulled at the chains, dragging the alien girl to her feet, her body weak, her eyes hollow, yet still she did not beg. The dust clung to her silver skin, her lips were cracked, her hair tangled with blood and dirt, but her spirit whispered inside her, "I must endure." The captors gave her no food, no water, only the cruel whip of a chain and the roar of the beast to drag her forward. She stumbled, fell, rose again, her knees bleeding, her hands trembling, yet she continued step after step across the wasteland. The sun burned her skin. The ground tore at her feet. Still she walked, dragged and broken, but alive. One of the captors shouted, "Look at her." Still trying to stand, another laughed. "She thinks her pride will save her, but in the end, she will crawl like the rest." Their words cut like knives, sharp and mocking, yet the girl gave them no answer. Only silence, only the stubborn fire in her eyes. The beast growled as it pulled her, its body covered in scars, its back heavy with chains. It was more than an animal. It was a weapon of war, trained to crush, trained to destroy. The captors whipped it to move faster, and the girl's body dragged behind, rocks tearing her skin, her breath short and shallow. The desert stretched endlessly. No trees, no rivers, only dust and heat. The girl's vision blurred, but inside her mind she remembered her home. She remembered green hills, soft rivers and voices of her people. She held on to those memories like a shield, even as her body shook under the weight of the chains. From the distance, the human watched again. His eyes narrow, his heart heavy. He had followed them through the night, unseen, unheard. Every step of their cruelty burned into his mind. He told himself to leave, to walk away, to survive. But every time he looked at the girl, something inside him refused. He whispered softly to himself, "Why do they hate her so much? Why do they take joy in this?" But no answer came, only silence and dust. By the third day, the cruelty grew worse. The captors no longer cared if the girl lived or died. They tied heavier rocks to her chains. They laughed as the beast dragged her across thornfields, her body bleeding more, her breath weaker. "She will break tomorrow," one captor shouted. "By the 5th day, she will crawl on her knees." Their words carried across the desert like poison. But the girl's spirit did not break. She whispered in her own tongue words of defiance, her voice too soft for the captors to hear, but loud enough for the stars. She prayed to the memory of her ancestors, to the voices of her people, and though her body shook, her heart whispered, "I will not give them my tears." On the 4th night, the human came closer. Hiding behind rocks near their camp, he saw her chained to the pole again, her body too weak to rise, her eyes staring at the stars. She looked like a ghost of herself, but there was still fire in her gaze. He clenched his fists tighter, his heart burning. He wanted to step forward, to cut her chains, to face the captors, but fear chained him too. Fear of death, fear of failure still. Something inside him grew heavier with every passing day, a storm building in his chest. The question no longer was if he would act, but when. By the 5th day, her strength was nearly gone, her lips too dry to whisper, her eyes half closed. Yet even then, when one captor spat on her, calling her worthless, she raised her head slowly, weak but proud, her silence more powerful than their laughter. The human watching from the shadows felt something break inside him, his breath heavy, his mind whispering, "No more." On the 6th day, the captors mocked her even louder. They shouted that she was not worth the chains they used, that her body would soon rot in the sand. They dragged her through a dry riverbed filled with broken bones of past prisoners, pointing and laughing. "This will be your grave too," they shouted. Yet she kept walking, step after painful step, her chains rattling like a song of defiance. The human followed closely now, his knife always at his side, his eyes sharp, his anger deep. He no longer thought about leaving. He no longer thought about safety. Every moment he watched, his decision grew stronger. The fire in his chest was now a storm, and he knew soon he would step from the shadows. The captors did not notice, they only laughed, they only boasted. They only pulled at the chains, blind to the human eyes that followed, blind to the storm that was ready to break. The alien girl did not know she was being watched, did not know that one human heart had already chosen her, but perhaps in her spirit she felt it. Perhaps that was why her fire had not died. Perhaps that was why her silence was still defiance. And as the 7th day sun set in blood-red light, the desert itself seemed to wait. The beast growled, the chains rattled, the captors laughed, the girl whispered inside her mind. 10 days, only 10 days, and in the shadows, the human whispered back, "Not 10, not if I can stop it." The cruelty was not over. The suffering was not finished, but destiny was moving closer. The storm was ready to rise, and soon the silence of one human would become the roar of humanity itself. As the night grew darker, the human hidden among the rocks clenched his fists. He turned his eyes to the girl, to her chains, to the beast that pulled her like a broken doll, and in his chest he felt something heavy, something powerful. The question that burned in his mind was simple. How long can I stay silent? The desert was cruel, the captors were crueler, and the beast was strong. But sometimes one moment, one choice could change everything. The stars looked down like silent witnesses. The chains rattled in the wind, and the story of 10 days of suffering had only just begun, and somewhere, hidden in the shadows, humanity was waiting to rise. The 7th night was cold. The desert wind cut like knives. The captors slept around the fire, their laughter finally gone. Only snores and the crackling of burning wood filled the air. The beast lay chained, growling softly in its sleep, its breath heavy like thunder, and the alien girl sat against a wooden pole, her chains biting into her skin, her eyes half open but still filled with quiet fire. Not far from the camp, hidden behind sharp rocks, a human crouched low, his eyes fixed on the scene. He had followed them for days, silent, unseen, a shadow that never left, his heart heavy with anger, his mind torn with doubt. He was only one man, one wanderer. his clothes torn from travel, his weapon nothing more than a blade and a small rifle. Yet his spirit was not small. It was growing heavier with each day. He had seen cruelty before. He had seen slavery and war, but never like this. Never so shameless, never so cruel. The captors laughed at pain. They celebrated suffering. They tied a living being to a beast as if she were nothing, as if her life had no worth. And the human's chest burned every time he heard their mocking voices. On the 8th day he came closer, hiding in the shadow of a broken wall from an old ruin. He watched the alien girl stumble as the beast dragged her across the sand, her knees bleeding again, her shoulders shaking, the captors pulling the chain harder to make her crawl faster. One of them whipped the air above her head, laughing. "Faster, beast. Drag her until she begs for death," but she did not beg. She fell, rose, fell again, but her lips stayed closed, her silence louder than any cry. The human's hands shook as he gripped his blade, his breath sharp, his anger now a storm ready to break. Yet still he stayed hidden, his voice whispering in his own mind. Not yet, not yet. That night he dreamed of fire. In his dream, the alien girl's eyes looked at him. Not with fear, but with trust, her voice whispering though her lips did not move. "You cannot stay silent forever." He woke with sweat on his face, his chest pounding, the fire of the captors still burning in the distance. On the 9th day, the desert turned crueler. The wind whipped harder. Sandstorms rose like walls of dust. The captors covered their faces with cloth, but the girl was left bare, dragged through storm and stone, her skin cut by sand, her eyes red from dust. Yet even in the storm she stood when she could. She crawled when she must, and she endured. The human followed through the storm, his cloak pulled tight, his eyes never leaving her. Each step she took seemed to echo in his chest. Each chain rattle felt like a hammer against his heart. He whispered to himself, "She is fighting. Even now she is fighting," his voice shaking with awe and fury together. By nightfall, the captors grew tired. They rested by a dried river, the beast chained near them. The alien girl left in the dirt, her body too weak to move, yet her eyes lifted to the stars again. Silent prayers in a tongue only the wind could hear. The human moved closer than ever, his body pressed to the rocks, so close he could hear the chain scrape the earth. So close he could hear her shallow breath. For the first time her eyes turned, weak but sharp, and for the smallest moment they met his. Her gaze locked on the shadows where he crouched. Her lips did not move, no sound came, but her eyes spoke clearly. "Help me," the human froze, his heart striking like thunder inside his chest. She had seen him, even in her weakness, even in her pain. She had found him. Her plea burned into him like fire. He looked away quickly, his breath heavy, his hands trembling. But he knew now he could not turn back, not anymore. On the 10th morning, the captors laughed louder. "Today will be the last," one of them shouted. "She will crawl until her bones break." They cheered as the beast roared, pulling the girl once again, dragging her body across the sharp stones of the riverbed, her chains rattling like cruel music. The human followed, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. He could no longer hear their laughter without rage boiling inside him. Every cruel word felt like an insult to his own soul. Every drop of her blood a wound inside him. By midday, the girl collapsed again, her body too weak to rise. The captors whipped the beast, forcing it forward. Dragging her across the ground like a broken doll, they laughed. They shouted. They called her nothing. They called her weak. But her eyes, though fading, still refused to close. The human could not look away. His breath came sharp, his mind screaming. Not anymore, not one more step. He gripped his blade so tightly his hand shook. Sweat and anger burning in his veins, he whispered under his breath, "No more." The words small but full of fire. The day ended with the captors making camp once more, their laughter filling the air. The beast chained, the girl barely breathing, but her eyes still burning faintly like dying stars. And in the shadows, the human stood tall now. No longer crouched, no longer hiding, his decision made. He would not be silent. He would not turn away. The chains would not remain. The cruelty would not continue. For one human had chosen to rise, and the galaxy would remember what came next. The desert sun rose like fire, burning the wasteland in gold and red. The heat pressed heavy on every stone, every grain of sand, and every bone in the alien girl's body. Her chains rattled as the beast pulled her forward again, her arms shaking, her legs collapsing, the dust filling her mouth like ash. 10 days of cruelty had brought her close to death, yet her spirit, faint as a candle flame, still whispered, "Endure." The captors walked with cruel smiles, their armor shining under the sun, their voices sharp and mocking. "Look at her now," one shouted, "a broken shadow. She cannot last another mile, another laughed. By sunset she will beg us for mercy. Their words filled the desert. Loud and heavy, but the girl gave no answer. Only silence. Only her eyes lifting to the sky as if she searched for something beyond their reach. Her body shook with every step. Her knees bleeding, her back torn, her face pale. She stumbled once, twice, then fell hard on the ground. The beast roared and pulled forward, dragging her like a sack of stones. Her arms stretched, her skin scraped, her breath shallow. Still she made no sound. Not even a cry, not even a plea. The captors laughed louder. She is nothing now, one shouted. Less than dust. Less than an animal. They spat on the ground near her. They raised their whips, striking the sand beside her head. Crawl, beast girl. Crawl until your spirit breaks, they shouted, their laughter echoing through the wasteland like cruel music. From the shadows the human watched, his heart pounding, his breath sharp. He had followed for days, his silence heavy, his anger burning, but now his chest felt like a storm ready to burst. He saw her fall. He saw her dragged like broken wood, and something inside him broke. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles bled. His voice whispered, trembling. No more. Not one more step. The captors did not see him yet. They laughed at her suffering, blind to the eyes burning in the distance, blind to the fire that now refused to stay hidden. The beast roared again, pulling the girl across sharp stones, her skin tearing, her body rolling. The captors shouted in joy. She will not rise again. Her fire is gone. But when her face lifted from the dirt, her eyes still glowed faintly, weak but unbroken. She looked at the stars above even as chains cut her body. She whispered, barely a breath. I will not give you my tears. The human's chest shook. His mind roared with her silence. He saw not weakness but strength, not defeat but defiance, and he knew he could not turn away. Not anymore. He rose slowly from the shadows, his blade at his side, his breath heavy, his eyes locked on the captors, his voice whispering. It ends now. He stepped forward, each stride heavy with purpose, each step a thunder in the silence of the desert. The captors turned at the sound, their laughter fading. Their eyes narrowing, one shouted, Who dares step into our path? Another raised his weapon, their voices filled with mockery again. One man, one human? Do you wish to share her chains? They laughed, but their laughter was thin, uncertain. The human stopped only a few steps away. His eyes on the girl, not them, his heart pounding. His breath deep, he spoke loud now, his voice like stone. She is not yours anymore. The captors froze, then erupted in cruel laughter. Not ours? She is already broken, she is ours until she dies, one shouted. Another raised his chain. Leave, human. Or you will join her, but the human did not move. His hand steady on his blade, his eyes burning with defiance. No, he said, his voice firm, stronger than their mockery. No more chains. Not while I still breathe. The alien girl lifted her head. Her eyes weak but wide, she saw him. The figure from the shadows now standing before her. Her lips parted. No sound came, but inside her heart something stirred. A spark of hope, the captors growled. Their weapons ready. Their eyes filled with anger now. No more laughter, no more mockery. Only the sharp heat of challenge. One shouted, You will die for her, human. The human's grip tightened on his blade. His body trembling not with fear but with fury. His voice calm yet filled with fire. Then I will die standing, not watching. The desert fell silent. The beast growled low. The wind carried the sound of chains. The alien girl's eyes shone faintly. The captor circled and the human stood tall. One man against many, it was the breaking point. The moment when silence turned to defiance, when hidden eyes stepped into the fire, when cruelty was met not with fear but with courage. And though the captors laughed once more, though they raised their weapons high, the desert itself seemed to wait. The stars seemed to lean closer, and the story of one human rising had truly begun. The desert wind carried silence for a moment, the kind of silence that came before a storm. The captors stood tall, their weapons raised, their cruel smiles fading into frowns of anger. The alien girl lay chained in the dirt, her eyes half open, too weak to move, yet her gaze locked on the human who now stood between her and her tormentors. The beast growled, sensing the tension, its massive body shaking, its red eyes glowing like fire. Chains rattled around its neck as it stomped the ground. Dust rising into the air, the captors shouted, their voices sharp and mocking again. One human? One fool, you dare stand against us? Their laughter returned, but it was not full, not strong. It carried a thin edge of doubt. The human's hand rested on his blade, his other hand steady at his side, his breath calm but heavy, His eyes locked on them. Filled with fire, he spoke, each word sharp as steel. She is not yours anymore, not today. Not ever. One captor spat on the ground, stepping forward with his chain whip. You will die for this girl, he sneered, his voice cruel. And no one will remember your name. The human's grip tightened, his jaw hard. Maybe no one will remember, he said, his voice calm, but she will know someone stood. And that is enough. The alien girl's chest rose faintly, her eyes wide as she heard his words, her body broken but her spirit trembling with something she had not felt in days. Hope. The captors moved in closer, circling him like wolves, their laughter sharp, their weapons ready, the desert air filled with tension so heavy it felt like stone pressing down on every breath. The human stepped forward, placing himself fully between the girl and her captors, his voice rising louder now. You will not take another step. Not while I stand, one captor snarled and swung his chain. The metal cutting through the air with a scream. The human moved quick, his blade flashing, steel met steel. Sparks burst in the sunlight. The captor stumbled back with surprise, his cruel laughter gone, replaced with anger. The others roared, rushing forward, their boots crushing the sand. The beast roared louder, pulling at its chains, its eyes fixed on the human, its rage heavy, its growl echoing through the desert like thunder. The fight began, sharp and violent. The human moved fast, his blade slicing through the air, his body fueled not by strength but by fury, by defiance. One captor lunged, he dodged. Striking across the arm, another swung wide. He ducked low, kicking sand into his eyes. The desert became a storm of chains, steel, and dust. The alien girl watched with blurred vision. Her heart pounding, she could not rise, she could not help. But her spirit burned brighter with every strike. Every cry, every defiant word the human shouted. She whispered weakly, "Stand, human. Stand." Her voice too soft to reach him, but her heart prayed for his survival. The captors shouted angrily, their voices sharp with rage. "Kill him! End him now!" But the human stood tall, his blade flashing, his body moving with desperate courage, not perfect, not trained, but filled with the fire of someone who had chosen to fight. He was struck once, a chain cutting across his shoulder, blood dripping down his arm. He stumbled but did not fall, his teeth clenched. His eyes fierce, he shouted back, "Is this your strength? Cruelty, chains? Laughter at pain? Then I will show you what humanity is." His words carried across the desert like fire. The captors hesitated for a moment, their laughter silenced, their faces twisted in anger. They saw not one weak human but a wall, a flame that refused to die. The beast roared again, louder this time, pulling harder at its chains. The ground shaking under its massive steps, its red eyes glowing brighter. It watched the human fight, watched his defiance, its growl changing. No longer a roar of rage, but something deeper, something almost like recognition. The battle raged on, the desert filled with dust and cries. The human struck again, his blade cutting through the chain of one captor's weapon, sending it flying into the sand. The man stumbled back, fear in his eyes now. The others pressed forward, but their certainty was breaking. The alien girl's heart raced. Her broken body trembling as hope returned, she whispered again, "Stand, don't fall," her eyes shining faintly like stars. The human breathed heavy, his body bleeding, his arms trembling. But his eyes never wavered. He stood tall, one man against many, one man against cruelty itself. And as the sun began to fall, painting the sky in blood-red light, the desert held its breath. The captors growled, the beast stomped. The human raised his blade high, his voice roaring louder than the wind. "You will not drag her one more step." The fight was far from over, the odds heavy, the danger real. But the stand had begun, and in that stand, humanity itself had risen. The galaxy would not remember the laughter of the captors, nor the cruelty of chains. It would remember the moment one human chose to defy them all, and the story of that choice was only just beginning. The desert shook with cries of war. Chains clashed, blades struck, and dust rose high into the air. The human stood in the middle of it all, his blade flashing, his body bleeding, his chest heaving with every breath. He was only one man, yet he fought as if the weight of the stars rested on his shoulders. The captors surrounded him, their armor dark, their whips and spears striking from every side. One shouted, "End him now!" Another roared, "Show him what happens when humans defy us." They charged together, their steps heavy on the cracked ground. The human blocked one strike with his blade. The steel ringing like thunder, he ducked another and countered, his knife cutting across an enemy's leg. The man fell back with a cry, but before he could breathe, a whip cracked against his back, the pain sharp, blood dripping. His body staggered, his vision shaking. Still he did not fall, his teeth clenched, his eyes burning, his voice rising in defiance. "I will not break," he shouted, the words echoing across the desert, stronger than the laughter of his enemies. The alien girl lay chained in the dirt, her body weak, her breath faint, yet her eyes wide as she watched him fight, her heart trembling with every strike, every wound he took. She whispered, barely a sound, "Stand, human. Don't fall." Her voice lost in the storm, but her spirit reaching for him. The beast roared, its chains rattling, its red eyes fixed on the fight. It stomped hard, the ground shaking under its weight. Its growl grew louder, no longer the roar of a mindless animal, but the sound of something watching, something choosing. The human stumbled again, a spear cutting across his side, blood staining his torn shirt. He fell to one knee, his blade heavy in his hand. The captors laughed cruelly. "See, he bleeds, he falls, he is nothing," one shouted, raising his whip high. The human's breath came short, his vision blurred, but when he looked at the alien girl, when he saw her chained, broken, yet still unbowed, his heart roared louder than his wounds. His hand tightened on his blade, his body trembling as he rose again, one step then another. "I am not nothing," he growled, his voice sharp like fire. "I am human, and I will not let you break her." The captors faltered for a moment, their eyes narrowing, their laughter gone, their rage sharp. They rushed again, striking from every side, the desert filled with steel, with blood, with fury. The human fought desperately, each strike slower now, each breath harder, his body failing but his spirit burning brighter. His blade cut through another chain, sparks flying. One captor fell, but two more came, their weapons slashing. His arms heavy, his knees weak, still he stood, still he fought. The beast roared louder, its chains straining, its red eyes locked not on the girl, not on the captors, but on the human, its massive chest rising and falling, its growl deep, almost like thought, almost like choice. The alien girl's heart raced. She felt the beast's energy. She saw its eyes shift. She whispered with the last of her strength, "See him? See his courage." Her voice trembling like wind. The captors struck again, a spear slashing across the human's arm, his blade falling to the sand. He dropped to his knees, blood dripping, his chest shaking, his breath weak. The captors laughed in triumph. "He is finished. One human cannot stand against us," they shouted, raising their weapons for the final strike. But before the blades could fall, the beast roared, a thunder so loud the ground shook, its massive body pulled hard against its chains. The iron snapped, one link after another breaking under its fury. The captors turned in shock, their eyes wide, their laughter gone. The beast stepped forward, its shadow covering the human, its eyes glowing red but no longer with blind rage. It looked at the man on his knees, bloodied and broken, yet unbowed. It growled low, not at him but at the captors. The desert fell silent, the captors froze. The alien girl's eyes widened in wonder, her heart pounding. The beast stomped hard, chains shattering completely, dust exploding into the air. Its roar shook the wasteland. The captors stumbled back, fear flashing across their faces. "Control it," one shouted. "Hold the beast." But their words carried no power. The beast's gaze had shifted, no longer theirs to command. The human lifted his head weakly, his body trembling, his eyes meeting the beast's for a moment. A silent exchange, man and monster, courage and power. The alien girl whispered with tears in her eyes. "It sees him. It chooses him," her voice breaking. The captors shouted again, but their voices were filled with fear now, their weapons shaking, their power crumbling. For the beast they had once controlled was no longer theirs. The human pushed himself up slowly, his hand on his blade, his body broken but his spirit unbroken. He stood once more beside the beast, not against it but with it, and in that moment, the desert itself seemed to hold its breath. The stars above seemed to burn brighter, for the chains of cruelty had cracked, and the choice of one human had awakened something greater. The battle was not finished, the danger not gone, but the tide had turned. The captors no longer faced only one man. They faced the storm of humanity, and now the power of the beast. The story of survival had become the story of defiance, and the galaxy itself would remember what came next. The desert was no longer silent. The ground trembled under the roar of the beast. Its chains shattered, its massive body free. The captors stumbled back in fear, their eyes wide, their voices broken with panic, for the weapon they once controlled now stood against them. The human stood beside the beast, his body wounded, blood dripping down his arms, his breath heavy yet his spirit unshaken. His blade rested in his trembling hand, his eyes locked on the captors, filled with fire that refused to die. The alien girl lay chained still, her body weak, but her heart beating with new strength. her eyes wide with hope. The captors shouted at one another, their voices sharp with fear. "Hold the beast! Control it!" One cried, another roared, "Kill the human before it is too late." But their words were empty, their power already broken. The beast stomped the ground, dust exploding into the air. Its roar shook the sky. The captors hesitated, their weapons trembling in their hands. They had faced armies before. They had conquered worlds, but in that moment, the sight of one human standing beside the monster they could no longer control filled them with doubt. The human raised his blade slowly, his voice heavy but steady. "You laughed at her chains," he said, his voice carrying across the desert. "You thought her suffering was power, but you were wrong. Cruelty is not power, and today you will learn what it means to stand against humanity." The captors snarled in rage. Their pride burning, they rushed forward with a cry. Weapons striking, chains lashing. The desert filled with their fury, but the beast roared louder, swinging its massive head, its horns crashing against them, throwing bodies through the air like broken dolls. The ground shook as it charged, each step a thunder that shattered stone. The human fought at its side, his blade flashing. His strikes fueled not by strength but by defiance. Every cut, every strike carried the weight of his choice. He bled, he staggered, but he did not fall, not while the girl lay chained, not while cruelty still laughed. The captors cried out, their formation broken, their voices filled with fear now. It cannot be. One man, one beast. But fear had already hollowed their hearts. The human pressed forward, the beast roared. The desert itself became their battlefield. The alien girl's eyes filled with tears as she watched, not from pain but from something greater, she whispered weakly. "He stands. For me. For us all." Her chains rattled as she tried to move, her body too weak yet her spirit surging. One captor lunged for the human, his spear aimed at his chest, but the beast slammed its horn through him. Tossing him high into the air, another whipped his chain, but the human caught it with his blade, pulling the captor down, striking him hard across the sand. The fight raged until the desert was filled with silence again, broken only by the heavy breath of the beast, the sharp panting of the human, and the distant cries of the last captors fleeing into the horizon. Their pride shattered, their cruelty ended. The human dropped to one knee, his body trembling, his blade falling to the ground. The beast stood over him, its shadow covering him, its red eyes glowing softer now, no longer filled with rage but with strange respect. It bowed its head low for a moment, a gesture of recognition, then stepped back, standing guard like a silent sentinel. The alien girl's chains rattled softly, her eyes on the human, her lips trembling as she whispered, "You rose, when no one else would." Her voice weak but filled with awe. The human forced himself up, his steps heavy, his breath rough. He moved to her side, his hands trembling as he cut the iron chains, the metal falling to the ground with a sharp clang. The alien girl gasped as her arms were free at last, her body collapsing forward, but the human caught her gently, his arms steady despite his wounds. "You are free now," he whispered, his voice soft. "No more chains, no more cruelty." Her eyes filled with tears, not of pain but of release. She looked at him with a gaze that carried both gratitude and wonder. She whispered, Why would you risk your life for me?" The human looked at her, his eyes weary but firm. "Because cruelty is not the way of humanity," he said. "Because no one deserves to be broken, and if I had walked away, I would not be human anymore." The beast stood behind them, its breath heavy, its chains shattered, watching like a guardian. The alien girl leaned against the human, her body weak but her spirit burning brighter than ever before. The desert wind carried silence again, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence after storm, the silence that spoke of change. The captors were gone, their laughter silenced, their cruelty ended, the beast no longer theirs. The alien girl freed, and one human broken and bleeding, had proven that even against impossible odds humanity rises far above. The stars burned brighter, as if they too bore witness, and in that moment the story was sealed. Not the story of chains and cruelty, but the story of mercy, of courage, of defiance. The galaxy would not remember the captors' names. It would not remember their laughter, their whips, or their cruelty. It would remember the day when one human stood against them, the day when chains were broken, the day when humanity rose, and somewhere deep inside, the alien girl whispered to herself, a promise she would carry forever. "I will never forget him. I will never forget this stand." The desert stretched endless again. The storm had passed, but the fire of humanity now burned in the stars. a fire that would never fade.